Good to see you, Dan. Thank you.
Welcome back. We continue our hour of police under fire at a time in this country when we absolutely cannot afford to lose police officers. We are losing them in record numbers. It's just simply not a good time to be a police officer. There's no way to sugarcoat that. Not when so many in the public express open hatred towards law enforcement. Crime rates are soaring, and so many in the media are so quick to go for the jugular of police officers whose actions are brought into question before the facts even come out, or when too many legislators are all too eager to shift blame and scapegoat police when some policy goes wrong, or even if merely the political winds shift against them. We've talked about it on this show before. Police officers leaving in droves, retiring, switching careers, quitting because they're underappreciated, undervalued, and not given the tools they need to do their jobs. Not to mention the dangers police face on the job have gotten so bad. We're seeing frightening numbers of officers being shot in the line of duty. It's a perfect storm. And we as citizens should be really, really worried about it. We should be trying desperately to respond to the needs of our police departments. Waves of retirement, resignations across the country have many departments scrambling to fill open positions. That means officers who are left are often working to cover the gaps. In Seattle last year, the chief said the department had just over 1,000 officers, the lowest they've seen in a department which at full force should have 1,200 cops. The former chief in Minneapolis, who retired in January, said his department was becoming one-dimensional, just responding to 911 calls because they don't have the time or resources to be proactive. In New York City, the New York Post reports that more than 1,000 officers have retired as of May 31st of this year, and more than 500 have resigned. That's a 38% jump from the same time last year. Pittsburgh, the city hasn't hired a new officer in 2 years. There's been no class at the police academy. This while officers continue to retire and resign every month. There's even a hiring freeze because of the defund the police movement, and the city is in fiscal crisis. Not to mention the starting salary in Pittsburgh to be a cop, less than $17 an hour. $16.84 to be exact. I'm not kidding. So what can be done about this? Joining me now, Sergeant Jared Wilson, president of the San Diego Police Association, and James Smallwood of the National Fraternal Order of Police. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program. Appreciate it. Sergeant Wilson, let me start with you. Your department currently, 300 officers short of its target of just over 2,000. Why?
That's correct. We lost over 240 officers in the last year, but that only paints part of the picture. We were already down over 100 officers when that started, and we have over 200 officers in elements of training or on medical leave. So we really have only 1,500 officers, which leaves us severely understaffed. Our officers are leaving for other agencies that pay more. They're leaving for states that are more supportive of law enforcement and have cheaper housing, like Idaho, Tennessee, and Texas and Florida. And they're just fed up with being a big city cop at this point because the challenges that we face are overwhelming, while they can go to a suburban neighborhood 2 or 3 cities away for affordable housing.
That's an interesting point. Mr. Smallwood, are you seeing this on a national scale, that a lot of the big city cops are either saying, I'm out, or going to more rural areas?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. Thanks for having me on. You know, it's a sad state of affairs when we were in an environment at one point in time in our society where we had literally thousands of applications pouring into agencies across our country for less than 100 vacancies. And now we're seeing major city agencies sounding the panic alarm because they're having 10, 20, 30 applicants for hundreds of vacancies. And it's directly due to the fact that A, they can't afford to live in these cities, and B, we have reckless politicians, activist council members, rogue judges, all doing everything they can to point the finger at law enforcement officers instead of their failed policies, which is continuing to promote failures of public safety in our cities across America.
Mr. Smallwood, does it mean that I just wasn't paying attention, that I didn't realize that in a big city like Pittsburgh, cops were making $16.84 an hour?
You know, again, I hate to say that it's a sad state of affairs, but you can literally make more money packing boxes at Amazon or flipping burgers at some McDonald's across this country than you can putting your life on the line to serve your community. How absurd is that? You are exposed, you have more risk, your family is at risk, you're doing everything you can to serve your community, and instead of the cities stepping up and doing the right thing, making sure that law enforcement pay and benefits are competitive with other professional realms across our country, they're failing at their mission, and our public safety in our communities is decomposing at the same rate.
Sergeant Wilson, give me some solutions here.
I think we need to pay our officers a fair compensation, but we also need to show that they can do community policing, give them the resources to do that, which we don't have with bad staffing, and really make sure that they're making a difference. This weekend, I arrested an individual while on beach patrol, actually, on July 4th weekend for carrying a concealed firearm illegally. Known documented gangster. He was out on bail for the same offense and was released before I was done with the report. I don't feel like I'm making a difference, and my officers don't feel like they're making a difference when that's the case here. And we really want to get back to community policing and really serve our neighborhoods.
Yeah, and Mr. Smallwood, that's a frustration I hear from a lot of cops, right? It's not just, I focus a lot on the media attention, et cetera, which is sort of, disappointing and disheartening, et cetera. But I'll bet it impacts cops much more that you have these people being arrested and then immediately released on crimes where, 10 years ago they wouldn't have been.
Yeah, let's talk about what my colleague just mentioned. We have officers who are out there risking their lives, walking out of the door knowing that they may never see their families again, standing the line between good and evil, and doing everything they can to remove violence from our streets. Meanwhile, amidst a conversation about Second Amendment and guns in our country, we have politicians like Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, who is an absurd appointment of the fact that the FOP is not at the forefront of this conversation, simply trying to garner attention and deflect from his failed policies when he absolutely refuses to prosecute criminals who are doing violence in his neighborhood and across the community. We have that in every single major city across America. We are seeing politicians refusing to prosecute violent criminals. We're seeing judges let criminals out the door before the ink is dry on our affidavits. And who is suffering from that?
Yeah.
The folks suffering from that are the people putting the work in on the line, and first and foremost, the communities that are victimized by this violent crime and the terrorization of what we're seeing criminals do on a daily basis.
Well, this has been a very sort of frustrating segment, I think, for all of us involved here. But let me say one thing, and I talked about this earlier in the show on a sort of an upbeat note, which is the public at large likes their cops. The latest poll from Harris, we talked about it earlier in the show, shows 67% of Americans support police, with only 24% opposed to it. And these days in America, people are opposed to every institution. So cops are some of the most popular. Don't forget that, gentlemen. The people, and I think you know that, right? You know that from being on the streets. You know that from hearing from citizens that they appreciate you guys. Sergeant Wilson and James Smallwood, thank you.